Libertarians, welcome to another edition of Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. I have a returning guest coming in. It's been about 3.5 years since I last had him on. He was actually number 11 episode of Anarchast. We're now well into our 200th episodes, and his name is Walter Block. He's a very well-known libertarian. He's actually called Mr. Libertarian. He's been contributing to a body of work on libertarianism and anarcho-capitalism now for decades. He's, for those who don't know him, he's an American Austrian school economist and an anarcho-capitalist theorist, and he currently holds the Harold E. Wirth Eminent Scholar Endowed Chair in Economics at the J.A. Butt School of Business at Loyola University in New Orleans. And the reason I wanted to have Walter on again, besides the fact that it's been way too long since we've had him on, is because there's been a lot of uproar about Rand Paul and should anarchists support Rand Paul, or even should libertarians support Rand Paul. There's a whole bunch of discussion and debate going on about that, and I recently had on Judge Andrew Napolitano, who's an anarcho-capitalist, who was essentially saying that he believes that Rand Paul is just like his father, and for that reason he fully supports him. But I think there's all sorts of questions we need to ask about this, especially as anarcho-capitalists, in should we ever support any sort of government system or voting or presidents or anything like that? Is there any good reason to do that? And so we're going to get into all that, lots of questions. So first, Mr. Block, let me ask you, you just recently wrote about Rand Paul, and you said you do support him. Why don't you give us a little bit of the background on why you do, and why any sort of libertarian or anarcho-capitalist should or shouldn't support him?
Well, I don't know. To me, it's sort of like falling off a log. He's the best candidate who with a chance to win. I mean, the Libertarian Party, Gary Johnson, is also a pretty good guy from a libertarian point of view. And if Rand doesn't make it, I would support Gary Johnson. But I think Rand has a better shot in that if he wins the Republican nomination, he's in a major party, the major leagues, if you will, whereas the Libertarian Party is in the minor leagues. And I don't think that there's much of a chance that Gary Johnson will actually win. I think he'll do yeoman work in publicizing and promoting libertarianism, especially if he can get into those debates, which I doubt. But in any case, Rand Paul is way better than any of the other Republican candidates, and I think there are about 20 of them now, and he's head and shoulders above any of them. I think he's by far the most libertarian senator we now have. And if he wins, again, it's like falling off a log. Let's say Hillary wins the Democratic nomination. Who would you rather have, Rand Paul or Hillary? Well, I mean, you know, it's silly. It's sort of like denying that 2 + 2 is 4 almost, to deny that Rand would be better than Hillary. And yet there are people who I respect as libertarians, although I think they're going off the deep end here when they say that these are libertarians with wonderful libertarian credentials saying that they'd support Hillary over Rand. And, you know, I don't know what to say about that. It's just sort of silly, you know, non-libertarian. I don't know. So to me, there's not much of a question that Rand should be supported. And the only reason I wrote about it is because a lot of libertarians are saying either you shouldn't support anyone because you're supporting government or what have you, or, you know, they start saying, well, Rand is not really a great libertarian because he deviated on this and he deviated on that, and he changed his mind on the third thing, and therefore he's no good. Well, yeah, you know, Rand is not 100% libertarian. He's not his father. His father I called a 97% libertarian because I'm the 100%. I have to look at it from my own you know, eyeglasses, and I disagree with Ron on, well, 2 or 3 things, you know, and I disagree with Rand on more. I think Ron is a much better libertarian than his son. I wish the apple would have fallen closer to the tree, but what the heck. He's very good, and the reason I wrote about it is because so many libertarians are down on him, and I think it's unfair and improper, and I think Rand is, you know, pretty darn good, not excellent, but, you know, B-, or I gave him a 70 on my libertarian meter. I might have pulled it down to a 60, but everybody else is, I don't know, below 30, so he's pretty darn good.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see all the different perspectives on this and all the uproar that this has caused amongst the libertarian and anarcho-capitalist communities. There's some ANCAPs who support Rand. There's some that definitely don't support him, obviously, because of his involvement at all with government. So they're sort of the more extreme, which is fine with me. I have no problem with any sort of anarcho-capitalist or libertarian for the most part, really, as long as they really do want more liberty in our lives. But people have really there's been all sorts of perspectives, as you pointed out, people going off the deep end, of people who are, like you said, very well-known libertarians with a good background in libertarianism, saying they hope Hillary wins. Now, actually, I mentioned this, so maybe I can kind of understand their viewpoint. I was questioning whether it's good if we have a libertarian president at this time, and I actually mentioned this back when Ron Paul was running as well. I just questioned, will this help our cause or hurt it? Because the U.S. is in such dire straits at the moment. It's going down. The U.S. dollar is going to collapse. The U.S. government is bankrupt. There's no doubt about that. Is there a risk that I doubt Rand Paul is going to win anyway, because we saw what they did to Ron Paul, but is there a risk that if he did win, that it could actually go against libertarianism because he would be sitting there in the Oval Office as things really started to collapse?
Well, of course there's a risk. I mean, you get out of bed, it's a risk. You stay in bed, it's a risk. I mean, life is a risk. You never know for sure what's going to happen. But I think that any realistic assessment of the situation would be that if Rand Paul ran and won not only the Republican nomination, but then beat out Hillary, this would be magnificent. This would be, just fantastic, because even though Rand never calls himself a libertarian, he calls himself a libertarian conservative or conservative libertarian or a libertarian Republican or a constitutionalist libertarian or whatever. He never came out and said, I'm a libertarian, a pure libertarian, even though he would start pulling many troops home, not all troops home, because he believes that, we should get ISIS or something. But right now we have, what is it? I shouldn't say we. Right now the U.S. government has something like 1,000 military bases in about 150, 160 countries. Well, that's not defense, that's offense. And if Rand sticks to what he is now saying, Ron would pull all the troops back. If I were president, I would pull all the troops back and have a very strong Coast Guard protecting the country, which is what the Constitution says we should do. Rand will not pull them all, but he'll pull 90% of the troops out, or 80%, or some significant number, and therefore the U.S. will have much less imperialism. In terms of the Fed, he will certainly audit the Fed and maybe try to get rid of the Fed if the audit doesn't work, whereas Ron was calling for ending it, not auditing it. So Ron is a little better, but who else is calling for even auditing it? He's going to get rid of all sorts of departments. He's going to reduce foreign aid. He's going to reduce welfare. He's going to reduce crony capitalism. I don't know that he would favor legalization of all drugs, but he even now says that we should have less penalties for it. So I think he's against a raise in the minimum wage. I wish he would, come out against minimum wage, period. But at least it wouldn't rise, whereas under Hillary, it certainly will rise. So I can't see how anything could be true other than if he became president, this would be magnificent. Even now, in my article, what I say is, even if he doesn't become president, the fact that he's running means that the L word, the dreaded L word, libertarian, is mentioned. Because they talk about his father, and you can't talk about Ron without mentioning libertarianism. And even him, New York Times and the major media are all mentioning libertarianism, whereas when I first got into the libertarian movement, it was either left or right, Republican or Democrat, and nobody mentioned liberty or libertarianism. So this is really good. But I did want to get into one point that you made, if I might, and that is that in voting, you're supporting the state or supporting government. Look, the government is all around us. How did you get to work or school today, average person? You use the road, a street. Well, who owns the roads or the streets? I guarantee you, I'm going to pull out my wallet and really wow you, that I've got U.S. currency in my wallet. Look, there's a dollar bill. am I supporting the government by using a dollar bill? The other day,
why don't you flip it around and show the pyramid with the all-seeing eye on the other side?
Okay, this
that's interesting as well.
Prove that I'm a sellout because I have U.S. currency in my wallet. I use the roads. The other day, I mailed a letter, and guess what? I used the U.S. Post Office, and the government is all around us. Look, let me give you my famous or infamous slavery situation or a slavery example. So here we are. We're all slaves, and the master says, you can vote for overseer goody or overseer baddie. Overseer goody will beat the crap out of you once a week. Overseer baddie will beat the crap out of you once an hour. And we all vote for overseer goody. Because we don't want to beat up once an hour. We want to beat up, not that we want to be beat up once a week, but being beat up once a week is better than being beaten up once an hour. So we all vote for overseer goody. Now, this means we support slavery? Only the New York Times would say that, or crazy people would say that. We don't support slavery. We just want to be beaten up a little less. Look, I have another confession. When Obama, my man Obama, was running against McCain, I supported Obama, and I wrote about Obama. But I said, why? Because I thought McCain was going to drop a nuclear bomb on people. I think he was that crazy. And I don't much like dropping nuclear bombs on people. I think it's, a very bad thing. So I supported Obama. And yet nobody attacked me, that is, within the libertarian movement. Nobody said, well, Block is a sellout. He's not really a libertarian because he supports Obama. I mean, that's crazy. Murray Rothbard, Mr. Libertarian, if anyone is Mr. Libertarian, it's Murray Rothbard. He supported, I forget, was it LBJ or Goldwater? I think it was LBJ against Goldwater for similar reasons, but I'm not sure. But Murray was a political hound. He was always supporting this guy or that guy, whether it was governor, mayor, whatever. Why can't we? I mean, it's sort of like football or basketball or baseball. You root for the home team. I'm now supporting the New Orleans Pelicans. They're fighting the San Francisco basketball team. I support the Pelicans. Does that mean I'm not a libertarian because every Pelican is not a libertarian? I mean, come on. So this whole idea that libertarians shouldn't get involved in politics and we shouldn't root for people and we shouldn't support people is crazy. It doesn't violate the non-aggression axiom or the non-aggression principle, which is the essence of libertarianism. So I reject all of this, that we're supporting the government if we involve, like some voluntarists say that, and we shouldn't support Rand Paul because Rand is besmirching libertarianism. Well, he is besmirching it a little bit, but, compared to everyone else, he's great.
Yeah, I know down below in the comments, there's going to be a lot of what you would call your more extreme anarcho-capitalists, and I'm an extreme anarcho-capitalist as well. Although I'm very open to all kinds of ideas on how we can get to liberty, which probably is going to have to go one way or another through government in one way or another, because they're just not going to just disappear overnight just because we're saying smart things out here. So the one thing I want to ask you was, Judge Napolitano knows Ron and Rand, and he says that he believes that Rand is just as libertarian as his father, but he's just essentially lying, like politicians do, about certain issues, so that he gets more of a vote, so that he can actually get in. So, and Rand Paul also went to the Wailing Wall in Israel, and you don't go there and do that unless you want to become president, because that's every single person who's ever been president, as far as I know, who goes there. You have to have the support of whatever interests are over there, because they're very obviously very involved in U.S. politics and government. So I want to ask you this question: do you think it's possible that Rand is actually very, very libertarian, close to 90-100%, but he's just massaging it so that he can get elected?
Well, this is always a possibility. One would hope for that, but I'm sort of taking him on the basis of what he says. I met the man once. Let me tell you about how I met him. This reflects very greatly on me, so I hope you won't mind if I brag a little. What happened was there was this gigantic libertarian meeting for Ron Paul in, not Las Vegas, what's the other place in Nevada, the second biggest city?
Reno.
And there were, I don't know, maybe 2,000 or 3,000 libertarians. But then what they had was a special thing that if you wanted a special session with Ron Paul, you had to pay $1,000, and it was limited to maybe 100 people out of the 3,000 or so. And then if you wanted to have a special session with Rand Paul, again limited to 50 or 100 people, you had to pay 500. And then if you wanted a special session with another person, you had to pay like $100, and that third person was me. So it was Ron, Rand, and me, and I was honored that they would single me out as the third place person to give a special seminar. So I met him, I shook his hand, but that's all I know about him. I don't know him that well to know whether he's lying or not. Whereas I'm not intimate with Ron, although I have a bromance with him. I love him. I wrote a book about him, which is my love letter to him. So I think I know him a little bit better. I don't know that I know him well enough to know if he's lying, but I'd have a better shot. Because I've had dinner with him. I've met Ron many a time. I've known him for 30, 40 years. Rand, I don't know. So I'm just assuming that Rand is telling the truth, and this is how he feels. And if he's lying and he's really a surreptitious libertarian, well, then even the better. Because then we'll really have liberty if he gets through. But I'm not assuming that. I'm just assuming he's telling the God's honest truth as he sees it, and what we see is what we're going to get. And now, you see, Judge Napolitano, who I'm also a friend with, maybe he knows Rand better. But you see, just based on what Rand is saying, I don't say he's a 95 or 97% libertarian. I give him a 60 or a 70 or something. Maybe Judge Napolitano, Andrew, knows better than me, and I just don't go that far. In my writing, I even said that I don't go as far as Andrew Napolitano, the judge, but I do say that even as he is, he's really worthy of our respect and our support.
Yeah, that brings up another question when you mentioned that if he is a real true libertarian, and a true libertarian 100% is an anarcho-capitalist, but anything above 90% I can get along with fairly well. But the question is, let's say he is an anarcho-capitalist, he's a true libertarian, a pristine, pure libertarian, and he sees no role for government. He does not want any government involvement in his life. He thinks the markets can do a better job of every single thing the government does, which I agree with 100%. Let's say he gets in and he's president. How much power does the president really have, though? Because you mentioned if he gets in, then we'll have it'll be liberty again in our lives. I'm not so sure about that. What's your take on if he was president and an anarcho-capitalist, how much real liberty or change he could affect?
By the way, let me just say before I answer your question, I'm a professor. I'm never supposed to answer anything directly. I have to go circuitously. Even Ron is not an anarchist. Ron has certain anarcho tendencies, which are great, but he's more of a constitutionalist. Let's get back to 1776 or whatever. Although
he did say in one interview that he thinks the idea of anarchy is, I forget the word he used, I think he said great, and he said, I think that's wonderful. So in that sense, sorry to ask you another question, and maybe we'll get back to the first question first, but I think this is an important question, is what is an anarchist? Because I get sort of confused sometimes too, because does it really does it mean that you believe, that the word believe almost becomes religion, right? That anarchy would be the perfect way for humans to organize themselves? Or can you just have that as your sort of your goal or your idea, your move towards that sort of a thing?
Well, I mean, most people, when they hear the word anarchy, they go, my goodness, bomb throwing, beard. Well, I have a beard, but I'm not throwing. You have a beard too.
A little stubble.
A little stubble. I have more anarchist beard than you do. Most people think of, a crazy person throwing bombs. But if there's anyone throwing bombs, it's not anarchists, it's anarchists. So what does anarchy mean? The prefix "an" means against. So anarchists are against archy. And I define archy as unjustified rule. So we're against unjustified rule. Look, people say, taxes. The government requires taxes. Just April 15th passed a few days ago, and everybody's got to pony up. And the anarchists say, look, this is theft. Taxes are theft. And the opposition says, no, it's not taxes. It's sort of like you're in the U.S. club or the Canada club. not Canada Club booze, but Canadian Club or the Canadian group. But none of us have agreed to be part of the group. I mean, if you join the golf club or the tennis club or the chess club, you have to pay dues. And these people say, well, taxes are just like dues. But when you join the golf club or the tennis club or the condominium association and you agree to be paying dues to them for garbage collection or whatever, you've agreed. You signed a contract. We never signed a contract. I never joined the U.S. government. I mean, when the U.S. government started, it was 9 out of 13 colonies, which was not unanimous. And even in the 9 colonies, it was only a majority. It wasn't unanimous. Whereas in the free enterprise system, everything is unanimous. You have a coat, a lovely jacket, and you paid, I don't know, $100 for it to just pick a number out of the hat. You valued it at more than 100, otherwise you wouldn't have bought it. And the guy who sold it to you valued it less than 100, otherwise he wouldn't have sold it to you. So you had mutual gain, and there was unanimous consent. And this buying of the jacket on your part is sort of emblematic of what the free enterprise system is. And that's all the free enterprise system consists of. We're not in a crony capitalism. We're in a laissez-faire capitalism. So there's unanimity all throughout, but there's no unanimity in the government. So we anarchists are not against, we're not in favor of bomb throwing or violence. We're against it. And we're saying that the government is doing it per se and necessarily because they always tax. Now, let me give you another defense of anarchism, and that is there is anarchism right now between the countries of the world. There's anarchism between Argentina and Arabia. There's anarchism between Burundi and Brazil. There's anarchism, notice my alliteration, now up to the seas, between Canada and Chile. There's anarchy between Denmark and some other country beginning with D, but I can't think of one. There's anarchy between countries, and the only way to get rid of anarchy between countries is to have, wait for it, world government. But nobody wants world government, so we're all anarchists now. You know, what do they say? We're all Keynesians now. And we're all anarchists now, unless we want world government, which some people do. But sensible people don't want it. Look, I'm Jewish. We Jews are always running away from somebody, running out of this country, go to some other country. These people are picking on you. You run somewhere else. If there were world government, there'd be no place to run. So, you know, anarchy is not an evil word. It's just a prefix an against archy, and archy is unjustified rule. And if you're really against anarchy, you have to favor world government. Virtually no one favors world government except a bunch of hippie lefties. And so we're all anarchists, or virtually all anarchists. So you people who are against anarchy, embrace your inner anarchism, because we're all anarchists now. Now let me get back to your other question about power. How much power would the president have? If Rand Paul became president, would he have some power? Well, you know, what's his name? Obama says he's got, what is it, a pencil and a telephone or something, and he's going to do initiatory things. Well, I don't think Rand would do that, because Rand, I think, respects the Constitution more, and in the Constitution, the president is isn't supposed to be a dictator like Obama. Although I still favor my man Obama. I've got my man Obama's back. It was Obama against McCain, because he's sort of a reluctant warrior, and he hasn't dropped a nuclear bomb on anyone. So,
what a guy! He's winning that Nobel Peace Prize for sure again.
Well, he's a Nobel Peace Prize, so he can't throw the bomb, the atom bomb or the nuclear bomb. So I'm an Obama fan still. Unrepentant Obama fan in the context of McCain, but obviously not against anybody a little bit better than him. And, you know, on economics, he's horrible, but McCain wasn't that great on economics either. But getting back to the question of how much power would the president have? Well, I think the president would have a lot of power, especially in foreign policy, because he could pull troops back and make a very strong Coast Guard, and maybe have 1 or 2 countries where we're bombing or something. I don't know. That is Rand Paul. Ron has said he would get rid of them all. I think that the president, look, if Rand won, he would have coattails. Then members of Congress would say, well, you know, we're now in Libertopia, or libertarian land. So when Rand now puts forth something to get rid of, I don't know, the Department of Commerce or the Department of Education, or get rid of the Fed, he's going to have a much better chance than if Hillary were president. So, you know, I agree with you that the president is not all powerful, except when Obama is taking extra constitutional powers, but he's still pretty powerful, especially over foreign policy. And foreign policy is more important than economic policy and personal liberties, because foreign policy sort of determines economic policy. The reason we have and Bob Higgs, a friend of mine, a historian, has shown over, and Tom Woods over and over again, and Murray Rothbard, that the reason we have a lot of economic interventionism, it stems from war. Get ready for World War I, World War II, this war, that war. And every time we get a war, we sort of ratchet up government. And then after the war goes, we don't really get much further. We just sort of increase government. So foreign policy is very important. The president has a lot of power in foreign policy. So I think that it would be really worthwhile getting off our rear ends and supporting him. Now, look, a lot of people say, well, there are other ways of promoting liberty than politics. And I agree with that. I mean, politics is just one way. Murray Rothbard used to say that every 4 years or every 2 years, people who ordinarily are interested in playing golf or bowling or playing chess or whatever it is, and they're not really interested in politics, but every 2 or 4 years they focus on it. So why shouldn't we try to get some small part of that megaphone? But there are other ways to promote liberty. I once ran for office. I ran as for a New York State Assemblyman in 1969, and then I once tried to become the president or vice president for the Libertarian Party, but I didn't make that. But I support the Libertarian Party, and I support Ron Paul. I wrote a book in favor of him. I give a lot of lectures to annual state conventions of the Libertarian Party. I'm active in the Libertarian Party in Canada. I've given a lot of lectures there. But there are other ways. The Free State Project in New Hampshire, all the libertarians go to New Hampshire. Seasteading is a good way of promoting liberty. The Mises Institute, which is my favorite think tank, is a way of promoting liberty. My own way of promoting liberty is I'm a professor. I write books. I write articles. I give interviews like I'm now giving. And a lot of my students are now professors and are converting their students to libertarianism and Austrian economics. So there are many, many ways toward liberty. Politics is one of them. It's a good one. It's not the only one. It's not one that I specialize in. I specialize in more academia. But to answer, just to summarize the thing about power, no, the president isn't all powerful. He's not like the prime minister, who's got more power in Canada than the president in the United States, but he's still got plenty of power, and it's worthwhile fighting for Rand Paul.
Yeah, very interesting. And I think one thing that's sort of not been mentioned too much is that there's a real libertarian movement going on. And you've been in this movement, which you could almost say you're at the beginning, back with Murray Rothbard, which really, in my opinion, was the beginning of this sort of philosophy, ideology, and beginning to spread. And Murray Rothbard actually said, I watched a speech of his recently where he was saying how he became an anarchist. And he said back in the old days, there was literally six anarchists. And we'd be sitting in a room and we'd joke about how maybe one day somebody might know our name or something. And this has really taken off. And then, of course, Ron Paul was the biggest next movement to really move that forward. He, in my opinion, has created more libertarians than anyone alive today, in my opinion. I could be wrong, but that's my opinion. And, of course, as you know, once you're a small L libertarian, it's not too long before you start to say, well, yeah, why don't we, if we cut 97% of it and it's way better, let's cut the other 3% and see what happens. But I
wanted to mention two things that your point brought up. One is this thing called the Dallas Accord of the Libertarian Party, because there was a fight within the Libertarian Party between the anarchists and the minarchists, minimal government anarchists, who believe in limited government, armies, courts, and police, and that's it. And the Dallas Accord was, well, let's not fight. Let's first get government down to 3% of what it is, and then we'll fight over whether we should go to the other 3%. So I don't usually debate too much about anarchists versus minarchism. I'm a big tent kind of guy. I even include Milton Friedman and Hayek as libertarians, even though they're really classical liberals. So that's I think. One point that I wanted to mention about this debate. The second point is who is responsible for converting masses of people to libertarianism? And I think Ron Paul is one of the two chief people. The other is Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand wrote this book in 1957, I think, Atlas Shrugged, which book converted me to libertarianism along with Henry Hazlitt's Economics in One Lesson. and she's not alive now, but I think there are two people that stand way over and above anyone else in terms of converting masses of people. Her book, Atlas Shrugged, is still selling like 100,000 copies a year, and it came out in 57, and you know, what is it? It's over 50 years, 60 years later. So she and Ron Paul, now she never called herself a libertarian, she called herself an objectivist, but and she dismissed libertarians as hippies of the right. There was some sort of product differentiation thing going on. But in terms of her policies on she insisted that in addition to libertarianism, you have to have views on metaphysics and epistemology and aesthetics and all sorts of other things. You know, and I was part of that movement on the periphery for a while, but I never really got into that other stuff. To me, the only thing that was really important was the political philosophy of laissez-faire capitalism. So she and Ron, I think, are the two most responsible for masses of libertarians. When I first met Murray, I asked him not how many anarchists there were, but how many libertarians there were in the world, and this was in 1966, and he said about 25. So maybe there were 6 anarchists and 25 others, and you know, we've come a long way, baby. You know, the gays say we are everywhere. Well, we are everywhere also, and it's interesting that the two, Ron, now Murray Rothbard and Hayek and Friedman and Mises, I think were more intellectuals. Whereas Ron and Ayn Rand were not so much intellectuals as they were more popularizers, although they were also intellectuals. They made intellectual contributions, but their conversion of masses of people was not the intellectuals, whereas Mises and Hayek and Rothbard had a narrower following. But based on Hayek's second ideas or secondhand dealers in ideas, Mises and Rothbard converted people like you and I, perhaps, and then we went out and, you know, me in academia and you with your radio show and many others promoted liberty peripherally. But it was Ayn Rand and Ron Paul, I think, who get the credit for the most conversions, and yet their personalities were very different. You know, sometimes the question is, well, what's the best way of converting people to libertarianism? And my answer is, as an Austrian subjectivist, there's no one best way. We each have to convert people in our own way, and there are some people that would like the Ayn Rand way, which is sort of taking a fish and smacking you in the head with it. If I could, you know, she was really in your face and very magnificent. And Ron Paul is much less aggressive, much less assertive, much more laid back, but equally successful in converting people to libertarianism. So I say there's no one right way to do it. You know, this audience might need something, that audience might need a different way. Not that you should change the idea, but maybe change the presentation, change the topics. If you're talking to left-wingers, maybe talk about legalizing marijuana. If you're talking to right-wingers, maybe talk about legalizing gold more, but not deny the other. In other words, don't go to the left-wing group and deny that you favor gold, and don't go to the right-wing group and deny that you favor legalizing drugs, but maybe emphasize it more or something like that. And with the right-wing group say that, look, we want to legalize prostitution. It doesn't mean we favor prostitution. It just means we favor the legalization, which is a very different kind of a thing. Or with pot, marijuana, we don't favor the use of it. We just oppose putting people in jail for doing things that many of us think, you know, you shouldn't do, like recreational marijuana.
Yeah, I think you've pretty much convinced me here on sort of that anarchists should support Rand Paul. But you know, as far as going out and voting, well, we all know that voting is for one person, it's useless and a waste of time, because unless the vote was decided by one vote, you made absolutely no difference. However, I think in this case, in some ways, maybe you can, because even if let's say it comes to Rand Paul and Killary Clinton and her vice president Michelle Obama, and you know, Satan itself running for president, and say it's Rand Paul on the other side, and Rand Paul loses by a few percent. That still shows, in some ways, especially if he's been really pushing a lot of the libertarian stuff, that people are going to go, "Whoa, this libertarian sort of style is," you know, it just shows in the numbers that it's got a interest in the public. So in that respect, it might make sense.
Well, I think that Rand Paul will have the biggest hurdle of getting the Republican nomination. And he might not make it, but I hope he does. But I think if he gets it, I think he'll beat Hillary, because he can out-left her on foreign policy. She is a warmonger. She is a neocon type. She is going to lose the people that like Elizabeth Warren, who are more, or Bernie Sanders, who are more lefty on foreign policy. And she doesn't favor legalizing drugs as much as Ron does, or reducing the penalties for that. So I think that Rand can peel off traditionally Democratic votes, the black vote, the African Americans. I think he's got a much better shot at getting that vote than any other Republican candidate. I think he's got a much better shot with the Jewish vote. Look at what happened with Obama, with Israel and Netanyahu. So I think with the young people. So I think if he just gets it, he'll beat Hillary. I think he might not get it, but if he gets it, I think he'll beat Hillary, although, I've been proven wrong before in these assessments, but, I hope it. But I think you're right. Even if he doesn't beat her, even if he doesn't win, if he gets, 47%, she gets 53%, libertarianism will be on everyone's lips. People will now read Hayek or Mises or Rothbard in a way that they wouldn't be before, because they would say, well, what is this libertarianism? And I think maybe in the next election in 2020, maybe Rand would beat her then if he loses in 2016.
Yeah, so I think, it definitely makes sense. I even, I know you were up there with Tim Moen, the leader of the Libertarian Party of Canada, who's an anarcho-capitalist, and actually every single leader of the Libertarian Party of Canada that I know, Sieg Pede, who started it, Katie Chown, who was the last one, and now Tim Moen, they're all anarchists. So I even joked with them. I even sent an email out to a few of my Canadian, because I'm from Canada, friends, and who are quite well known, like James Corbett and Dan Dix and Stefan Molyneux. I said, why don't we all just run for this upcoming Canadian election? And they all were actually very against it. They said, I don't want anything to do with it. It's like, no, this, what if 4 anarchists get elected? Because we all have a big audience. The people I mentioned, James Corbett's got a huge audience, and totally possible. And all of us, obviously, we're all in media, so we can all talk. We can all, do the walk sort of thing, and then people might listen to us. But they were all against it. And so it's sort of funny. I'm an anarchist. It's sort of funny, all these things we have to do as anarchists to bring about anarchy. You have to actually play these games and get involved in things you would never want to get involved in. But it's also interesting, too, because us anarchists, what we want is more government. We want 7 billion governments. So you brought up the point earlier about how it's always better to have more states. One world government is the worst case scenario for not only anarchists, but human beings in general, and the planet also. So if we can get that in the U.S., I don't know why this never gets brought up. It seems obvious to me, because the U.S. was started as separate states, and then they just, after the fascist Abraham Lincoln took over, it became like this one big state, and they took over everything, which is what fascism and all that's all about. Why is, that should be something that should be talked about more, I would think, is why don't we just go back to 50 separate states and let them have sovereignty over themselves? Because there's so many, you talk to anyone in most states and they're like, oh, I hate those other people from these other states because they're always doing different things that I don't do or like. And separate. And there's, of course, been a fairly big separation movement happening, in different pockets all over the world, including Venice, Italy, wanted to separate, and all kinds of places, of course. It's really, really interesting time. So this interview is getting a little long, and you're, I'm sure, busy there. So if you want to respond to that and make any final comments, and also let people know where they can get more information on you and your books and everything else.
Okay, great. The problem with you as an interviewer, if I may say so, is that you are so fascinating and you have so many ideas. Like in the last time, you raised like 5 points that I want to respond to. This is just
if you have time, go ahead and respond.
Well, I sort of promised you an hour, and we've got another 15 minutes. So let me reply to the 5 points that you just made, or 6. First of all, in Canada, I have roots in Canada. I worked for the Fraser Institute in Vancouver. Well, now it's spreading around, but when I was there, it was just in Vancouver. I worked there from 1979 and 1991, and I did 10 different books and many, many articles. So I'm a little bit more familiar with the Canadian situation than many American people, such as I am. I'm also a Canadian citizen, a dual citizen. And I am sort of a buddy of Tim Moen. He and I have been on several programs together. And I wanted to mention advice that I gave to him. What he asked was, well, what about abortion? How should he respond to abortion? And what I said to him, and I'll say it now, and I'll say it to these 4 or 5 people that you were suggesting that run for office, because I'm supporting you on this. I'm going to try to get them to run for office on the Libertarian Party ticket as well. And what I said to him is, say something like, look, the general public is very, very unsure or all over the lot on abortion. There's pro-life, there's pro-choice. People in the general public are very unsure philosophically about this. The pro-choice is in the ascendancy, but there's a lot of pro-life sentiment in both countries. And it's the same thing in the libertarian movement. You have Ron Paul, who is a staunch pro-lifer, if anyone is a staunch pro-lifer, and you have Murray Rothbard, who is another libertarian with great libertarian credentials, who is a staunch pro-choicer. So we diverge on this, and therefore the Libertarian Party has no position on this. And I am now Tim Moen. I'm now on stage. I'm representing the Libertarian Party. So all I can say is that we're unsure about this, just like the general public. However, if you want to see me afterward, I'll give you my own views. And Tim Moen is a pro-life, so he can give his own views. Or even on stage, you can say, you know, I personally believe in pro-life. So that's one way for libertarian office holders to run and be true to their own principles and say, look, my own personal view is X, Y, Z, but the Libertarian Party has no position on this because we're as divided on this as the general public. Okay, second point. You're right. You mentioned 4 or 5 Wendy McElroy is another libertarian in Canada. Karen Selleck, a whole bunch of people who write for the National Post.
Redmond Weisenberger as well. Why don't we all just run? I think we still got time.
Right. I think this would be magnificent if how many ridings are in Canada? 99 or something like that. It would be ideal if every riding had a libertarian candidate. And there are high-profile libertarians. 4 or 5 people who write for the National Post are pretty good libertarians. Karen Selleck, Wendy McElroy, yourself, Tim Moen, who is obviously running. Vic Pross is another one, an artist, a libertarian. Paul
Stefan Molyneux.
Stefan Molyneux, Paul Geddes, a whole bunch of libertarians. And what's his name? Grubel was once a member of Parliament, Herb Grubel. He's not really a libertarian; he's more conservative, but he's sort of libertarian-ish. If people, and then there's the Prince of Pot, Mark Emery. I don't know if he's eligible to run, but his wife is, and she would be a very attractive candidate. So if you got 15 people like that, high-profile libertarians, you could make a big splash for liberty. Okay, you're not going to win, big deal, but you can bash away at the other 3 parties. You know, the NDP at one time talked about legalizing marijuana, but then they got off of it, and Justin Trudeau was talking about legalizing marijuana. You could support him on that. So I think that would be a magnificent idea. The other thing I wanted to mention is Abe Lincoln and secession. I mean, you only spoke for 2 minutes, and yet, you know, first about Abe Lincoln. Everybody in the U.S. and Canada thinks of Saint Abe. Abe Lincoln is magnificent. Abe Lincoln is wonderful. My friend Tom DiLorenzo has done several books on Abe Lincoln. Dishonest Abe, he calls him.
Yeah, I'm hoping to have him on in the next few weeks. We're connected right now, so I've never had him on Anarchast, so I'm excited.
He's magnificent. And one of the quotes that Tom brutes about that comes from Lincoln was the following. This will be a paraphrase, maybe not the exact words, but this is what Lincoln said. What Lincoln said is, look, I don't give a rat's rear end about slavery. Lincoln never spoke that way, but I'll put it in modern parlance. I don't care about slavery. I care about secession and keeping the country together. If slavery will keep the country together, I'll support slavery. If slavery will undermine the country, I'll oppose slavery. I don't care about slavery. I care about keeping the country together. That's my goal. So, you know, this is not so saintly. I mean, you know, because he's got the reputation of favoring, you know, ending slavery. He wasn't an opponent of slavery. The abolitionists were opponent of slavery, but not Abe Lincoln. Okay, now the second point, there was no civil war in the United States in 1861. because a civil war means that each party wants to run the whole country. There was a Spanish Civil War in 36 because the fascists and the communists each wanted to run all of Spain. There was a civil war in Russia in 1917 because the Red Army and the White Army each wanted to run the whole country. But in 1861, there wasn't a civil war because while the North wanted to run North and South, the South didn't want to run North and South. The South just wanted to secede. Well, so the correct appellation or the correct way to refer to the so-called Civil War is a war of secession, or a war to prevent secession, or a war of northern aggression, because it wasn't over slavery, although, I mean, there was slavery in the North too. By the way, the first secession movement was in 1825. Massachusetts wanted to leave the United States because there were a lot of abolitionists there, and they said the United States supports slavery, and we want out. So, people say, well, if you support the South, you support secession, you support slavery, you're anti-black or something. The obvious rejoinder to that is Massachusetts. They weren't. They were opposing slavery and they wanted secession. So secession is very different. And now you mention all these places like Scotland, which unfortunately failed, but there's this place in Italy, a place in Spain. New Hampshire is thinking of seceding from the country with all those libertarians on the Free State Project. And then there, like people in California want to secede from California. And you're quite right. We love government so much that we want 7 billion of them. Namely, secession is the key, because another aspect of libertarianism is free association. You should not be compelled to associate with people you don't want to associate with. The only problem with rape is that the rape victim is forced to associate with the rapist. The only problem with slavery is that the slave is forced to associate with the slave master when he really doesn't want to. And, the Civil Rights Act of 64, I think it was, or 65, 63, somewhere in there, when Woolworths was forced to serve black people that they didn't want to serve, free association was also abridged, and therefore there's a little bit of slavery. Now, libertarians, nowadays there's this big thing in the United States that a gay couple will go to. See how you get me going? You just said 3 words and I'm just babbling. There was this photographer or baker or florist, and a gay couple went to them and said, hey, we want you to help us out at our wedding. And they said, sorry, we don't want to because, our religious views don't allow us to support weddings. But, if you want to buy a cake or a pizza here, we'll sell it to you. The libertarians go further. The libertarians say, we should have free association, period. And if you don't want to serve blacks or greens or blues or left-handed, red-headed people, you shouldn't be forced to. So libertarians take a very radical point on that. And thanks to Thomas Sowell and Walter Williams and others in labor economics who have shown that if you discriminate against groups, it's impotent to really hurt them. And that the real discrimination is a thing like the minimum wage law, which unemploys black people, or drugs, which put black people in jail at highly disproportionate rates. The Thomas Sowell and Walter Williams make the point that if you discriminate against, say, blacks, and you won't hire them, their salary goes down, their wages go down, because the demand curve shifts to the left, to put it in economic parlance. But if so, and the black productivity is the same, then you'll make more money if you hire a black at these below wage levels, and now you'll unemploy all the bigots. So this is a little bit of bringing in economics to the analysis, and also
I've also when I talk about that, about how if someone wants to, they have a business and they want to turn away a certain people, fine, that business is now less successful, so its competitors will have an advantage on them. And I always use this as a example. If an NBA owner hates black people, he doesn't want any black people on his team, that's fine. They'll come in last every year and he'll go out of business. He only hurts himself.
Precisely. And I think Thomas Sowell and Walter Williams, by the way, who are both black, and since the view of the major media is that all blacks have to be socialists, and these guys aren't socialists, the understatement of the year, therefore they're Oreo cookies. They're really not authentic blacks. They're black on the outside, but they're really white on the inside, which is crazy. Well, it's almost at the end of the hour, and I promised you an hour. So let me just say in conclusion, if you're interested in my work, walterblock.com, or email me at wblock, WBLOCK, at loyno.edu, Louis Oliver Yellow, New Orleans, LOYNO.edu for education. And we can be in touch. And thanks for having me on your program. And don't make it 4 years till the next time, because I very much enjoy interacting with you.
Yeah, you as well, and we'll definitely make sure it's less than 4 years in the future. And it might be even sooner if we follow through on this grand idea that we just spontaneously came up with, that all of us should run for government in Canada, including yourself. I don't know, I've been looking into this because I don't live in Canada and you're obviously in the US. I don't know if you have to actually be resident just to run. So I could just do it on the internet, all my speeches and debates, and basically all my answers will be, they'll ask me, what's your position on this? What's your position on that? And I'll tell them, you don't even have to ask me. Just ask yourself, is there a victim or not? If there's a victim, I'm against it. If there's no victim, I'm totally for it. Or not totally for it, but I'm fine with it.
For the legalization of it.
Yeah, for decriminalization. We could do so many interesting things, Can you imagine if we did this? And let's talk to Tim about it, Tim Moen, the leader of the Libertarian Party of Canada. I'm all for it. I think it'd be fun. James Corbett, again, a big guy. Dan Dix, big name in Canada for Press for Truth. Redmond Weisenberger, the Mises Canada founder. Wendy McElroy, one of the icons in the libertarian movement. And there's more and more, as you pointed out. We could almost have like a big name person as far as, in the libertarian sort of circles, in the running, in many ridings in Canada. That would create a huge amount of press.
By the way, speaking of Mises Canada and Redmond Weisenberger, there is a Mises University that'll take place in Toronto in July, and young students particularly, but anyone I think is invited. So get in touch with you or me if you're interested. It's a 3-day seminar, not so much on libertarianism, but more on Austrian economics, which is the free enterprise economics. So people might be interested in that.
Yeah, and I think that's free.
Yes, there are scholarships thanks to funders, and also I'm a big fan of the Mises Institute in the U.S., and they are having a seminar in July also, a whole week, and it's also free scholarship. So if you're interested in that, Google Mises Institute in the U.S. or Mises Rothbard Institute, Mises Institute in Canada, or Mises Institute in the U.S.
Yeah, lots of great things to check out if you don't know them. You might be hearing more about this idea we just had, which I think is a great idea. And so we'll see what happens. That'd be pretty, I think it would go amazing. I think as well, I know we only have like 2 minutes left, but the Canadians in general are kind of funny with politics. I don't know if you ever noticed this. People like Rob Ford, who many people probably know, a lot of Canadians just love him. There was Jean Chrétien. He once punched a protester in the face, and a lot of people thought that was great. And then there's Pierre Trudeau before that, this drinker guy. He was always giving the finger to the media. People liked him. So they're not so much like in the U.S., where if you want to become president, you have to exactly look and act this certain way, and you can't have any sort of personality outside of, you can tell a few jokes, or you have no real character about you. You're just this person who reads off the teleprompter. But in Canada, they're more open to that. So it could be interesting.
Yeah, there was a Rhino party for a while. I don't think they're around, but you don't have to be a mucho serioso. We can have fun. I would be happy to do it, but I think you have to be a resident, not just a citizen. I'm a citizen of Canada, but not a resident. I'm a resident of the U.S., so I can't do it, but I certainly will root this on, and I'm glad that the two of us concocted this while we're talking here. And I think Tim Moen should invite all these people that we've mentioned and others, high-profile libertarians, and get them to run for the LP.
Yeah, I actually looked into it. Richard Heathen, a past Anarchast guest, I believe you know him as well. He did the Rise of Collectivism movie, which was awesome. Just came out. We'll put a link to that down below if you want to check it out. And he's also Canadian. So he was the one who sort of first brought it up to me. Or I might have brought it up, but then he said, I think you can do this. And I said, well, I don't have time, but can you look into it, or someone look into it if you have to be resident or not? If not, then I'll do it. But I'm not going to become a resident of Canada for tax reasons, to just elitist to do this, but if I can do it, I'll do it. So that's great. Thank you so much, Walter Block. Check out all the stuff that he mentioned. If you don't know him, one of my favorites is he wrote a book about the privatization of the roads and how it should be done or would be done or how it would be so much better. And that's a question a lot of us libertarians always get is the roads, So that he's the one who's really answered that question. So check that out. We'll put a link to that down below. Lots of links, lots of stuff for you to check out. And also like, subscribe, share to these videos. That's how you can spread this message, and it is growing. So this is Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. Peace, love, and anarchy.